Bill, $100 billion a year over 10 years. It's basically the bill that gives taxpayer dollars to the farming industry. If you just look at the headline, you might think Congress is reforming the way it does business because the bill gets rid of direct payments to farmers, which have been discredited for years. But if you look a little closer, what Congress is taking away with one hand, they're giving back in the form of crop insurance. And a lot of it benefits the richest farming interests and not the little guys, according to the watchdog groups that follow this stuff, Wolf.
Isn't it easier to justify crop insurance for farmers than just giving them direct payments? At least it looks better, right?
Okay, that's the logic, but the devil is in the details. Here are some examples singled out by the nonpartisan watchdog group Taxpayers for Common Sense. Item 1 is sushi rice, making the taxpayers prop up the sushi rice business. The bill guaranteed prices for growers of the rice. The government is guaranteeing 115% of the market price for the product. Catfish farming. The government is ensuring that catfish farmers earn a profit every year in states like Mississippi and Arkansas. Pennycress. Does anybody even know what pennycress is? It's a weed that depletes the soil, but in the bill, it's now a crop to receive crop insurance subsidies because there's hope it could be the next big biofuel. And Christmas trees. A bill like this in Congress is often labeled a Christmas tree because there are so many unusual things attached to it. But in this bill, there's an actual Christmas tree provision, an industry-funded promotion, research, and information program for fresh cut Christmas trees. Wolf?
Who doesn't like Christmas trees? Everybody likes Christmas trees.
Yeah.
The government, though, is still picking winners and losers in the farming business with this bill. It's sort of like in the old days.
Yeah, in a way, yes. According to the Environmental Working Group, which tracks farming policies, the big losers in the bill are recipients of the food stamp program, which is trimmed only slightly, and smaller-time family farmers who can't compete with the big farming interests, which, of course, make out big in the bill. The Washington Post editorial page called on the president to veto it today, but the White House suggests he'll sign it if it reaches his desk.
Still got a little bit more legislative process to go through. Joe, thanks for that background. Let's get some more now with our CNN Capitol Hill reporter, Lisa Desjardins. Steve Ellis of the group Taxpayers for Common Sense, and Chandler Gould of the National Farmers Union. Lisa, how much this bill, why is it so important? We just heard a little background, but you've been studying it.
This bill affects what we eat, what the prices are for most things in the grocery store that are essential. Joe hit on it. It's not just that it picks winners and losers, Wolf, but it picks winners and losers based on 1932's version of what was important. So just a handful of crops are getting subsidies here. Things like wheat, that's great. We all need bread. But let's think about corn. That is one of the few still getting subsidies, and it's the reason that things like high fructose corn syrup are so cheap, so prevalent in our processed food, which people say is not good for us. On the other hand, one other thing, we need to know what's in our food. This bill takes a line on an important fight over labeling, says we need to know where our meat was born, where it was slaughtered, and where it was processed. That's an important step in this bill.
I've been in Washington, Steve, long enough to know that on almost any big piece of legislation, you're always going to find some junk in there, shall we say, some stuff that really isn't worth taxpayer dollars. But let's talk about sushi rice, Christmas trees, some of the stuff we just heard Joe report. How wasteful is this bill?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a nearly $1 trillion bill, as he indicated, and that while people are talking about cutting these direct payments, which is about basically $40 billion over the 10 years, a little more than that, they're actually plowing a lot of that into crop insurance subsidies, as Joe indicated. And some of it's not just these small bore things. We're talking about shallow loss provisions that are going to guarantee farmers up to 90% of their revenue from year to year. Well, what American wouldn't have wanted a policy like that in the past few years with the way the economy has gone? And then there are even provisions where they actually cut it in the bill, like the Sheep Improvement Center, and then it was voted on the House floor, eliminated $1 million for that. It came back in the conference with $1.5 million.
Yeah, that goes out in Washington all the time. You represent the farmers, Chandler. A lot of folks look at this and they say, you know what, at a time when we got to cut back, isn't there a lot of waste in this bill?
This is actually a very good bill, though. I think one of the key points we've just left out is that it saves $23 billion in deficit reduction over the next 10 years. And because of the programs in this bill, It affords every American the ability to only spend 7% of their disposable income on food purchases compared to other countries like France, where it's 14% or even double that. And then, as Lisa just mentioned, it also maintains very important consumers' right to know provisions, country of origin labeling.
You know, Lisa, a lot of people don't realize that almost 50 million Americans rely on food stamps. And the food stamp program is part of this farm bill. It's going to be trimmed somewhat. How serious is that problem?
Right. There are people who, once this bill is enacted, we expect it looks likely to be enacted, they'll see $90 less in food stamps on their table every month. The thing about that, though, is the way they did it is a little complicated jujitsu on Capitol Hill. That cut will only happen in 16 states in the District of Columbia as part of the compromise. But for those people who are affected, that is a very big deal.
How big a deal is that? Because I'm worried about people who need this food to survive.
Well, I mean, it is kind of ironic that in the final score, the CBO is about $16.6 billion saving. Half of that's being borne by the food stamp recipients. And not only that, 2/3 of the savings are in the second 5 years of the bill, or after the bill has actually been is passed. And so we're looking at still a very costly program, and that but
Can't
the one
you
that
find
we're
better ways to
disproportionate
save money than food stamps?
You know, when you look at the amount, the 79% of the bill is food stamps. The Farmers Union has always come out and supported the way the Senate did the bill with the $4 billion in cuts, but eliminating the direct payments and by streamlining many of the programs, that's where we come up with the $23 billion in deficit reduction.
These guys actually were for lower cuts.
Exactly.
These guys want as much cuts, I think, in some ways, to cut the deficit as you want. But the truth is, obviously, they've got to come from somewhere, and so they struck this bargain.
A lot of people are